Ladies and gentlemen, today's guest is the premature finisher, Aidan Aguilera. Make of that what you will. He is taking on Lukaz Catubig at Demolition Fight Series 14 for the professional lightweight title on May 25th in Sunshine, Victoria. Very close to Melbourne. So if you're out there, do check it out. And if you want to find out why you should check it out, we have a nice little chat with Aidan Aguilera. He's a former Eternal MMA lightweight champion. He won it in very bizarre fashion, where he checked a kick and broke the leg of Jack Becker. Jack Becker, a very well-established fighter. And if you're a big fan of Australian MMA, you'll know that we gave him Comeback Fighter of the Year for 2023 because he battled back from that broken leg. Jack Becker very much was at the time at the door of the UFC. But Aidan Aguilera is back. He has been around. His first professional fight was 2009. So he's been fighting for 15 years. He's had, 20 official fights, even more unofficially, because he was fighting that long ago. He's a very funny guy. He's a very insightful guy. He's doing a lot of coaching out of Adrenaline MMA Fitness. Got some youngsters, of course, fighting in Demolition Fight Series. He talks about how he got the fight on Demolition Fight Series, as he has had a little bit of a break. His previous fight, Tom Nolan, who's now in the UFC. So Aidan's right up there, and he's one of the funniest fighters going around. He's got some really good pre-fight trash talk and got good insights into the game of mixed martial arts. If you want tickets, hit up Demolition Fight Series on Facebook or go seek out Aidan Aguilera or Adrenaline MMA Fitness on Instagram. Just message them and see if you can tee up some tickets. Or I believe the pay-per-view will be on Fight TV May 25th. But ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, the premature finisher, Aidan Aguilera. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome my guest, Aidan Aguilera. Mate, as the only man who has won an Australian title by breaking another man's leg, welcome.
Thank you, mate. Bradbury that one, and I'll do it again.
Now, you're back taking on Lukaz Catubig, Demolition Fight Series, 14 May 25th for the professional lightweight title. It's like Wayne Carl heard, hey, you want to see some pros? Here's some pros. It is probably one of the best match-made matchups I have seen in a little while. It's easy to go number one versus number two, but to actually kind of know the guys in the scene and put guys who are in different stages of their career, different sort of records, all that sort of stuff, and to find you such a good matchup, you're obviously quite pleased with taking on Lukaz for Demolition, yeah?
Yeah, it's a really fun matchup. It's he's been around for as long as I have, and it makes sense, which is fun because it's like often not really what I get offered, and that's fine. Like, but this is one of those ones where I'm like, yeah, sweet. Like, yeah, this actually on paper makes sense where we're both at. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, because I was going to say your previous fight, Tom Nolan, which like didn't make sense at the time, but now you look at it and you go, that's actually really cool because now he's in the UFC. But at the time when you're offered guys like a Tom Nolan, who I think were 4-0 at the time, are you almost like, I don't know, insulted sounds like the wrong word, but what goes through your head when you're 8-7 or 8-6, whatever it was at the time, and you get given a guy that's 4-0?
Oh, I mean, I get it. They got to be tested, and like they got to gradually step up further and further. And it's like it's not like that matchup didn't make sense as far as like skill level or anything like that. It's just I was matched to fight Brenton Mumford, and then he had to pull out due to injury because the poor bastard's gone through the trenches as far as injuries are concerned. And then Tom was the fill-in, and it's like, I'm not really going to say no to anyone. And it's like, I knew that was going to be a hard matchup. I don't think I got to perform to the best of my capabilities for a few reasons, and that's all right. I definitely could have given more of a run than I did. Not going to say I would have ran through him or anything, but no, it's not an insult at all. It's just one of those things where it's like, where I'm at now, I don't want to be someone else's stepping stone to get to the UFC. I don't want to be like a win on their record. I want fights that make sense for me.
Yeah. Does it feel like, I mean, I guess it's good to hear from a fighter's perspective as well, because on the outside, I mean, look, anyone can beat anyone any given night. Everyone's super skilled. But let's be real. We'd be lying if promotions, like there's matchups where, say like this one, where it's just a fun fight, right? But then there's matchups where you go, this is clearly served up to be a good record for someone else. Say like if you're a Cody Haddon, a Tom Nolan, a Harry Webb, it does sort of seem like they're like, oh, here's this attractive record. If he beats him, it looks really good. And it almost does look like it's a fight for someone else. Do you notice that?
Of course, that's a very real thing. It's not like it seems like that's what's happening. That's exactly what's happening. We all fucking know it. And that's a game. You have to build stars, right? And every promotion wants their guys to make it to the UFC. You know, they're Harry Webbs, they're Quillen Sal kids. Not saying that they're padding their way through at all. That's not what I'm getting at. But when you get like a real good prospect like that, it's in their best interest to build them up. So I get it.
Yeah, and I do feel like there is the sort of other side of it as well, where if you're a guy that's been around a bit, like a Michael Barber taking on Justin Van Heerden, right? Michael Barber beats him. You can't. He doesn't just go back to, okay, well, you're going to go fight the other guy that's 5-5. It's like, no, man, you're kind of
Yeah.
right at the top. So it is kind of a great gamble, and I feel like it helped with when Lockie Stitt took on Peter Templar, and yeah,
Exactly.
and then he kind of, like, let's be real, that was not served up. It's a tough fight, but it was for Lockie Stitt. Templar then wins, ends up getting submission of the year on multiple platforms. And it's like, now he's got a bit of hype. So do you kind of like that risk as well when you are the 8-6, 8-7 guy?
100%. Well, that's the thing, right? Like, no one's getting forced into these fights. Like, none of the journeymen are like, oh, I guess I'll do it. It's like a lot of these guys are super skilled. They just didn't quite get the momentum they should have. You know, they fell short here or there, whatever. And that's what makes the sport so fun, is every now and then the punching bag wins.
Which one are you? Are you the journeyman?
In this matchup?
No, just in general. Like, how do you, like you said, you see it when it happens. When do you sometimes go like, hey, I'm not the record to be served up?
Yeah, well, I think that's what we all feel like, speaking as like one of the journeymen of the journeyman, is that you're like, motherfucker, I got an easy fight.
It's like, was there a point in your career? Have you always been, because like a Justin Van Heerden is a good example. He's kind of always been the guy that was served up, and he just happened to keep on winning.
Yeah.
And was there ever a moment where you kind of felt it shift from being like a young up and comer to like, oh, holy crap, I'm getting sort of offered up to these younger guys?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's like you make a decision at some point, like early on when you haven't lost and you got this momentum. We all think we're going to make the UFC and that kind of deal. And that's great. You got to think that. Like, fuck yeah, go for it. But like, I'd had, I think, 1 or 2 losses, and I always bounced back pretty good. And then I was offered a loss to a skilled Japanese fella, and I got offered to fight in Abu Dhabi against this like ex-UFC guy, Alan Omer, who's very good. I think he would have been probably right up there in Bellator if he's had some medical issues, for a decent paycheck. And I was like, I'm taking this paycheck. Let's give this a crack. Like, give it a good go. I know this is going to be really hard. This is not a smart matchup, but I think at some point a lot of us make a decision. Fuck it, let's just go for it and see what happens.
And before we sort of focus on this fight coming forward, I do like to always circle back to when you did check the miraculous leg kick, which broke Jack Becker's leg. You walked away with the title as a quote unquote journeyman. You finally reached the top, like the best promotion in Australia type thing. You get the title. How much out of 100 did you feel satisfied because of kind of how it happened?
Very little. Like, literally, we went and the Luistro Combat guys were in the same corner as us, and they invited us out to some burger place afterwards. And it was me, my girlfriend, my coach. We're sitting there, we got a beer each, and we just literally cheers. And I was like, yeah, to not losing. And we just jinxed, and that was it. Like, I'm a realist, man. Like, it's super unsatisfying. Like, what can you do? Like, it happened. I never celebrated it. It just did.
Like, that's what I was going to say. Like, obviously you are that type of fighter where you don't celebrate that sort of stuff. I mean, you still checked it. It's not like Jack came out, rolled his ankle and died. Like, it's like you had to still do something. But do you think over the years to come, you are going to sort of find a way to really value that title?
Oh, I mean, it's regardless of how it happened, I still won it. And it wasn't like he had a heart attack on the way to the cage.
Yeah,
You know? Like, it wasn't a Simpsons episode. And I felt great. I know I can test him because I fought him before. And like, it's one of those ones where I can go into hypotheticals all I want. I felt like I felt fantastic that night, felt on. Doesn't mean shit. What happened happened. It was a I was a defensive technique utilized well. It's just unfortunate that the consequences of that, if he had a shot and I threw it a knee as he shot and he ran into the knee, it would have been, same kind of completely different thing. But it's a game, right? It's a game of millimeters and milliseconds, and what can you do?
It's weird because it isn't an injury. Like it's an injury, but it's not like you literally forced it. So it's like it should be like, oh my god, what an amazing IQ fight! He's a genius. He deserves the title. But yeah, it is. It kind of just goes a bit like, oh. But in
Yeah.
saying that, does it? Are you inspired to get that title back to almost do it right this time, or like where are you at in your career?
I mean, sure, I would love the title. It's not like I'm thinking one fight at a time, but it's more I don't know how to describe it. It's moments for me, right? Like I want to achieve stuff for me now. It's like, so I would love to fight Jack again. I think we'll probably manage to make that happen at some point, just to find out hopefully what would have happened that night. Not the same night. It's not the same thing, but it's just I feel like I owe it to him. He owes it to me. Well, we owe it to each other to do it one more time and just figure it out.
And like you said, you are one fight at a time, and you've got Lukaz Catubig, who's been around as much as you have. I mean, when's the first time he ever came across your radar?
He sparred at my gym a very, very, very long time ago, maybe 10 years ago for one session, just because he didn't have many sparring partners at his weight at that time. I think it was right when Absolute had first started as well. And then after that, maybe a year or two after that, I did a training camp with one of my close training partners who fought him on the very first Hex event. So I cornered against him. So I've been across him the entire way through his career in Australia.
How did this fight come about? Did you, because I know that you were taking some time off, maybe some injuries. Of course, Matt Myers, the former Eternal MMA middleweight champion, of course, going through some injuries. So you guys seem to almost be focusing on like the coaching aspect, the getting the youngsters ready. Of course, that's how you're so involved with Demolition Fight Series, because Wayne Carl runs a great ship there with all your amateurs. But how did the sort of you getting the fire back and getting back into the professional and then this fight happening?
I knew I was starting to get the itch back because I was sparring a lot more, and I started leaning out just to make sure I could make the weight properly and all that, and it wouldn't be a rush. And I was actually talking to Josh Warner, the matchmaker for Demolition, about some of the other guys trying to get them fights. And I was like, hey, just a heads up, I'm looking to dip my toes back in. If anything comes up that makes sense, just shoot me a message. I don't care when. And he's like, actually, we've just lost an opponent for Lukaz Catubig. Would you be interested? I said, yep, let's do it. And then a day later, Lukaz came back with yep, and here we are.
That's awesome. Do you know who he was originally slated to fight?
Jesse Medina.
But that's another good one as well. It's like
they're smart with their matchmaking. They're good. It makes sense.
It's almost like they know what they're doing. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's almost like just having a podcast and saying names is not as hard as being an actual matchmaker.
Almost.
Now, I mean, like you said, you've seen him around for many a year. I mean, how do you see this fight going?
To be honest, I think on paper this makes sense. Given where we're at, I think I should be the favorite of the bookmakers. It's not that means a whole lot. I think it'll probably start off close, and then the longer it goes, it's going to favor me a little bit more, just because he's not really known for his conditioning. He tends to slow down a little bit, and I've never had issues with fitness, so it's one of those things where the longer it goes, the more it's going to favor me. I think he's a really solid striker, but so am I, and I think I've got the edge on him in the wrestling and the grappling. But having said that, he's fought a killer's row. If you look back at his record, he's fought a lot of very good guys and done well against a lot of them. So not taking it lightly at all.
Firstly, thanks for the quote. That's going to go well.
What quote was that?
He's like conditioning is like, so it's
great.
It's great.
You shit stirrer. Lukaz is fat.
Yeah, so you know what? I should just go full, like, not even follow the actual quote. Just be like, Aidan Aguilera says he's fat.
Yeah. Franken cut it. Just cut the words individually.
What we have to do is, if you ever see me do like 3 dots after a sentence, that means like I'm taking a bit from a paragraph, and then when you do dots again. So if you ever see that little sneaky, that's how I know I'm finding the right quote.
Shit stirrer.
No, I mean, you do love shit talk going into the fight. Of course, I famously remember the great David Martinez back and forth, but it's almost like this cheeky banter with your mates type stuff. Do you ever have any guys you genuinely like have disliked going into fights?
Not really. Like the Martinez stuff was more like people just loved it, and I was pissed at him for like a space of like a week, and I called him out publicly for it. And then people loved it so much that we just ran with it. And it's like when I'm in Eternal, I'm not a Queensland guy, I'm not a Perth guy. So like, how am I going to keep myself relevant at the top of the card? I've got to sell tickets somehow, you know. So I'll happily be the bad guy. But only one I can think of was a while back when me and Josh Togo fought. He'd gone online, and funnily enough, we're boys now. He's all good. Like I really like Josh, and he's a
He's a
great
great guy.
fighter.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a good dude. But I think he was on the piss, and I was fighting one of his teammates, and he started running his mouth in the Facebook comments, and that I think I was coming off a fight where I'd lost because I hadn't really turned up mentally. So I just channeled that little exchange on Facebook into just pure meth rage. Like it wasn't really a big deal. Like I made a big deal out of it just because I needed to fire up.
Do you need that sometimes, or is it?
I think back then, yes. Now I'm pretty confident I can turn up like pretty consistently as far as like mentally. Like I've had so many of these now. Like I've got a bunch of fights that aren't on my record that never, because the Victorian scene early days was kind of weird. So I've had a lot of fights. So
How many not on the not official
I should probably at least 3 or 4.
wins?
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
Well, then go get them.
I don't know how. Like I don't care. There's like, but I've got wins where I'm knocking people out with elbows like in 4 minutes 30 into the second round, and they're not on my record and stuff. Like so, it's
Really?
yeah, yeah. But the Victorian scene was a mess back in the early days. Like we didn't have a cage. I was always on the undercard of kickboxing shows, so it's like who
Yeah.
cares?
Well, when I was a youngster in Perth, coming up to the Fitness and Fight Centre, that's right. I mean, you mentioned Luestro Combat Academy. Ramel was like a young guy coming up. Steve Kennedy, who eventually made the UFC, didn't do well, but he eventually made there, and he was a killer on the Australian scene. But
Pretty
same sort
glad
of,
you mentioned
but same sort of thing. Like all the MMA shows used to be like they were piss breaks for the Muay Thai shows. So like everyone would get up and go because like if especially if there was wrestling and like everyone was
it.
like this, and it would have been weird because even for you as an MMA guy, like when we would say MMA is like more exciting to us, it's more exciting, right? But if you just love striking, you'd rather watch sort of Muay Thai, cage Muay Thai, all that sort of stuff. But did you feel as a fighter at those shows immediately when grappling happened, the crowd was like, "Fuck this"?
Little bit like it was so early days for me that I was so nervous and lost. I didn't miss, I thought it was a big deal, being on these big kickboxing cards, but man, it was a mess. Like we'd be deciding the rules backstage between the two coaches would meet up and agree on rule sets and stuff. It was mental.
Yeah, I wish people could see that now, because if you go to like Sunshine, Demolition Fight Series, the Victorian Commission's there, all the refs are there. Any questions? This is behind the head. This is not behind the head. This is a legal strike. This isn't. They go through it all. They even get down on all fours and they're like, okay, this is like the weight bearing. This isn't. And it's like you would remember back in the day where the guy's like, all right, we doing gloves or no gloves?
Yeah, it was like some of these refs didn't know what submissions were. I saw some insane stoppages or like reset, like because they're just kickboxing refs that were just like, all right, I'll referee this MMA fight that have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, it was very similar to when like David Martinez lost to like the buggy choke in the Brave.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
one.
that kind of
That
stuff.
was like that was routinely happening in Australia.
Yeah, it
Everyone.
was mental.
Well, talk us through your first fight. I mean, why did you first get in the cage?
So I was 19. It would have been 2009. I'd been training for ages. Like I'd done a lot of jiu-jitsu and wrestling and a tiny bit of kickboxing, but like I hadn't even done like hard MMA sparring. And then one of my training partners was a good friend of mine. I jumped into like his first fight, and he was like, I'm like, fuck, if he's doing it, I have to, because I've been training for like 2 or 3 years longer than him. So I was like, all right, I'll do it too. And then the dickhead manager of the gym at the time decided to talk me up big time and ended up being the main event of the first show, first fight I ever had. Well, this 19-year-old kid with no fights fighting this like 30-year-old Turkish dude in a ring. There were soccer kicks to the head were legal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you're allowed a soccer kick to the head. It never didn't happen, but yeah, and it was just I had my eye was like swollen shut within like 10 seconds. I reckon he had a loaded glove. Like they didn't check our gloves or anything. You supply your own gloves.
Yeah, I remember that as well. You used to be able to just show up with your own gloves.
So like me and my mate were like we're filling each other's gloves, and mine were smaller and harder. So we both wore my gloves that night. Like it was a mess.
And, I mean, as a guy that's now coaching young up and comers, I mean, first of all, what's the sort of thought process that you put in, or what's the checklist guys have to have before you'll let them fight? And how much do you think MMA has obviously changed on the amateur scene?
Oh, it's math. The amateurs are good now, man. Like there's some really like skilled amateurs that you know are going to do well at pro when they do turn pro. You know, there wasn't an amateur scene when I started, so I think that's a huge part of it. Like it just wasn't a thing. I never wore shin guards. I never wore anything other than 4-ounce gloves. I think my second fight had elbows. Like it's like it was just a circus back then. Whereas now it's like generally we do novice fights at our gym, and then there's another gym that does like no headshots novice stuff, which is like, yeah, it's a good entry point. It's not super realistic, but good entry point. And then we do like they're 2 2-minute rounds, and it goes to a third if it's a draw. But like they're real fights, and it's just to see how they react to that rather than doing it in front of 5, 6, 700 people, 1,000 people. If you're on an undercard of Eternal, imagine making your amateur debut on like a HBF stadium show from like 3,000 people. It's just mental. So we do like smokers where they're real fights, see how they go. If they handle that pretty well, then we'll, send them to Demolition or something like that and go from there.
And as a coach, what do you need to see from guys? Do they need to be, especially in an amateur, like, do they need to have to want to make it to the UFC and they're training 5 times a week or twice a day? Or do you let guys that just kind of want to train twice a week still fight? Like, what's the checklist you need?
They need to prepare properly. So they don't have to want to be the UFC. We've got plenty of guys that are hobbyists. They're never going to take it very far. Sometimes it's like these guys are just like they're doing their one amateur fight and that's it. But they got to be training like 4 or 5 times a week minimum. And even then, I'd like you should be doing 6 days a week, at least a lead up. Give me like 2 months of solid work, But like it's a dangerous game, right? Like the last thing I want is for them to go in there underprepared, get hurt, or have a shit time and think like, nah, this isn't for me because they sold themselves short, So we're pretty strict on that. If they're not preparing properly, they're not doing it.
What's the sort of most challenging moment you've had as a coach?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Thanks, mate.
I think it's like I hear this quote about parenting where it's like it's not your job to be their friend, it's your job to be their parent. It's making those hard calls of like I'm pulling you out because you're not putting the work in, or like they really want to fight and they were dealing with this little injury, but I'm like, mate, this is like you're not operating well, or stuff like that where I've had to pull people out. That sucks because I know how much it sucks as a fighter, but it's my job to be the adult here and look after you and make sure you're in a good spot.
So you've done that? You've had to pull someone out?
Yes.
Is it?
100.
Does it happen a lot?
No. Our guys know what's expected of them. Like we make sure we sit down and have a chat. Like this is what your commitments are. And usually it's not, hey, they're not turning up. It's just like maybe something hectic happens in their personal life and they think they can juggle both balls, but it's a lot.
Yeah, I've always people ask me all the time if I'll ever get in there. And I'm like, look, if you could do it if you asked me once after Friday night sparring, and there was a contract right there, I'd be like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
And it's like, but that next day when I want to go for a picnic with my girlfriend, it's like, I don't want to go to jiu-jitsu. And it's like I don't think people realize that it's like that 7 days a week is like hell of commitment.
It sucks, dude. Like it's not fun. It's not, and it doesn't happen quick. It's like it's a long time. It sucks, and there's gonna be days where you don't really feel like going to the gym, but you have to. It's a job. Someone else is getting ready across the state or across the country to beat the shit out of you. You put the work in. Like if you're not going to be willing to do that, then don't get in there.
Yeah, and it's almost like I want to explain it to people as well as there are people out here that they were like 7 and all they wanted, like the Cody Haddon, right? When he was like
Yeah.
6, 7, he wanted to be in the UFC and he's trained like he's wanted to be in the UFC. He's now like 23, 24, maybe even 25. It's like, for nearly 20 years, he's trained his entire life to get into the
Mhm.
UFC to bash you. It's like, how are you going to train 3 times a week? Like,
That's the thing. Like even on debut, it's like you might just be a hobbyist and like you're doing your two a week kind of deal. You might be coming up against the next Cody Haddon who just happens to be having his first amateur fight, but he has like big time aspirations and he's putting that work in. And it's like if as a coach, if I send you out there and you get fucked up because of that, and like it skews your view of what MMA is, or you get hurt, that's on me.
yeah, like we've got some young guys that are starting to get really good. Like even in Bunbury, which is 2 hours south of Perth, right? They've just started to have some amateur fights. So they're like 1-0, 2-0, and they're killers now, absolutely killers, right? And they thanked me the other day. They're like, "Oh, thanks for helping me when I was like really young, coming in, I didn't know anything." And they don't realize that like I was helping them in the session because I was tired and I didn't want to go with anyone else. But it was like, oh yeah, I'll help this youngster throw it. And you're like, yeah, yeah. And then you watch him go, and you'd be seeing this now because you've been around for, like you said, first fight in 2009, it's 15 years ago. There'd be guys that have walked into your gym where you're like, you're probably not going to be anything. Like, and then all of a sudden now they're like world champion quality.
There's plenty of those, and it's like it's not just that. I think it's in your best interest to look after everyone, those young kids, because some of them turn out to be absolute animals. Like I was there when Val Sharapov started. He barely spoke English. He would have been so easy, so easy. Another one is the one I'm so happy I looked after. So happy is Matt Myers.
Oh yeah.
He came in as like a 17-year-old, so like you go harder on them because they're a bit older, and he came straight into the fight crew. Like he just gave it a good crack, and he was always tough as nails. But there was some of those sessions where like we went through the wars, and I was like, mate, you got to pick your hands up. I'm going to break your nose. Like this is when he was a teenager, and I'm so glad I looked after him because like that guy fucking sucks. He's the
Yeah.
worst. Like if I hadn't looked after him, I would be having the worst. I would have quit by now.
Well, it's like I want to call it like I just thought of it then. It's we can call it like the school shooter approach. Like you want to like, you want to be nice to them because like one day they're gonna be like that kid I used to help arm drag, like literally could beat the piss out of me now. And like he talks to me like I have an opinion. I'm like, oh yeah, no, maybe do this. When deep down I'm like, bro, you could murk me right now. But I was like,
Yeah, that's me and Matt Myers. Like it's like I'm one of the few people in the gym he doesn't absolutely beat the shit out of, and it's because I looked after him when he was a teenager, and I'm so glad I did.
one of the scariest photos in the world is Matt Myers, I think, holding a pit bull or like a
That's
giant.
his dog Ronnie. He likes to leave that dog out the front of the gym, and I don't think it's helping the memberships, but he's actually a sweetheart. He's the sweetest dog ever.
So speaking of Matt Myers, I mean, do we have a little update on him? Unfortunately, injury last year before UFC Sydney, I think it was, and he fell out with Brogan Anderson. That fight never happened. He was a pretty awesome middleweight champion for Eternal. What's his mentality at? Is he coming back?
He's definitely coming back. He's coming back hard, mate. I can't. It's not my place to talk about timing or anything like that, but he's progressing really well. I'm starting to move around with him again. Like I think we'll see him back soonish. I don't know when. But he's healing really well. He's been hitting his rehab like an animal. Like he's been training for rehabbing full time, and like pouring himself into the coaching at the gym. He's doing a great job with all our striking classes and all that. And I just want to go on record and say he would have belted the absolute fuck out of Brogan. No disrespect to Brogan, just Matt's just a bad matchup for him. Matt would have killed him.
What about Benny Johnston?
I back Matt against anyone in Australia.
Oh, I like it.
Anyone.
I like it. All right, mate. Before I do let you go, are you coaching and fighting at Demolition Fight Series?
Really good question because I have done that before, and I didn't mind it at the time, but I just think where I'm at, if I don't want any reason to be like, oh, I should have been more focused on that, so I don't think I will. I'll be backstage and I'll be watching because they've got their stream up on there, so I'll help them through the backstage process, but I'm not going to do the walkout with them and go out with them.
That's the only critique, right, of Wayne Carl's Demolition Fight Series. I love it all, right? It's the best setup, it's the best backstage, it's amazing, right? It's a good vibe, good venue, Love it all. The only thing I don't like is I think that one time I was there, maybe it happens all the time, but the stream is like
Yeah,
5 seconds
I know what you
delayed.
mean.
So
Yeah.
you're watching a fight and then you hear the crowd go, oh, and you know someone got knocked out, but you don't know who yet.
Yeah, 100%. So it's gonna be a real nervous wait backstage. Probably gonna be worse watching it from back there, but I feel like I'm just gonna try and minimize the stress of the night until it's my turn to stress. So yeah, I'll be watching from backstage.
And in Demolition Fight Series fashion, once you win the 55 belt, are you then going to go for a 70 belt or a 145 belt?
145 isn't happening. 145 is not happening. I will take any of those amateur belts. Like all the amateur belts.
Here's this, will you defend, because I think the previous champion was Abdallah Biata, who recently just went down to Harry Webb, ironically a huge Demolition Fight Series star. If you win the Demolition professional lightweight belt, are you defending it?
I have no fucking idea. No, I'm not thinking that far ahead. I mean, if it made sense, I wouldn't say no. I love fighting in Melbourne. I haven't done it in forever, so it's going to be really cool to have everyone there.
Yeah, sorry, you said that reminded me as well. You said could be my last fight in Melbourne. You said that on Instagram. Is that retirement?
No, it's not retirement. It's just if I'm not fighting on Demolition, I'm most likely going to be over in Eternal.
Not a Hex boy?
I was a Hex boy. Very long story, but no longer a Hex boy.
Ah, okay, interesting. I've never met an
Yeah,
Eternal guy. Never met a guy that's
I'm
all Eternal.
Now, don't get me wrong. All the promotions I love that all the promotions are getting massive. There's just some. I think I had 9 or 10 fights for Hex. I think. So I've had a lot of fights for Hex. Yeah, just like nothing worth talking about. It's just one of those things where I think that ship sailed.
I was gonna say
I've got some good fights in Eternal waiting for me. I think hopefully.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, like I'm brutal on Eternal at times. I feel like I'm fair, but I'm brutal. Like they have more of the lightweights. I mean, Harry Webb right now is struggling to find a fight. Is that, just before I let it go, Hex, is that salvageable, that relationship?
Potentially. It's not like I'm not a guy to hold like a stupid grudge, but I'll just say they've put me in a spot where I'm not coming to the table with what they're offering. So yeah,
it's the only promotion I can get in these days. So I want to watch you fight live.
Well, yeah. Well, then you don't want to get yourself in trouble, mate. Yeah.
All right, mate. I don't think I asked you this when we had a little podcast. By the way, is your podcast still rolling?
It will. I've just, between fight camp and running the business, I'm doing 5 a.m. starts and 8 p.m. finishes some nights. Like, it's just hard. I need to get back on it. It will, for sure.
Well, then I will finish it with this question. After it's all said and done, how does Aidan Aguilera want to be remembered in mixed martial arts?
Ooh, that's a good question. To be honest, I don't actually care. Like, I think I'm in a place now where it's like, I'm doing this for me. Like, I know what I've done and where I'm at and like where I've fallen short and where my strengths are. And I feel like I'm pretty secure in my character, but a younger version of me would have cared a lot. Hopefully people enjoy watching me, you know. I hope it's fun, you know, like, it's, at the end of the day, it's a big spectator sport. I'd like to think I put on pretty fun fights when I'm allowed to. But yeah, and hopefully people don't think I'm a piece of shit.
All right, mate. Where do they get tickets specifically from you?
If you are keen to get tickets specifically from me, come to Adrenaline MMA, come say hi, and I can sell them to you directly. If not, jump on Demolition's website, talk to the Carl family, and they will hook you up.
Awesome. All right, mate. Best of luck and break a leg.
Oh, that fucked. Thank you, mate. I'll try.
See you later, legend.